Hey y'all, how are you doing? Today I just wanted to share with you about a really difficult time I went through when I was very young. I look back now and my daughters, I looked at them when they were 24 like I was, and I think how did I do that? But when I was 24, I had my second child. I got married at 19, had my first child 9 days before I turned 21. And then I had Sarah in 1987, which made me 23. The last few months of my pregnancy, there were a lot of false starts. It felt like I had a lot of preterm labor. Went to the hospital several times, and she had a problem with her ultrasound. It said that she was supposed to be born September 15th, but the ultrasounds kept coming back October 15th. But I had been to the doctor when I was 2 weeks pregnant, so I knew exactly when she was due. Unfortunately, one of the other doctors in the practice didn't believe that, and so he just caused me some issues. But when she was born, she was small. But both my first two children were 5'9". My oldest was 5'9", and Sarah was 5'10". For me, she wasn't small. So she seemed fine for months. She did everything on time until she hit 6 months. And then she stopped progressing. And I went to the pediatrician. I remember that day I took her like it was yesterday. I had my oldest daughter with me, and I can remember being in the pediatrician's office, and she just loved dinosaurs, and she could say them all by name and knew the right, like Tyrannosaurus Rex, and she didn't have abbreviated names for them, Brachiosaurus and all those names. She knew them all. And it happened that when I was at the pediatrician's office, they had a boarder in the room that was all dinosaurs. So when he came in, I asked him, is this normal? I had her name all the dinosaurs as he went around the room. And he just looked at me and goes, well, is she right? I said, well, yeah, of course. To me, that was absurd. Why wouldn't she be right? And he goes, no, that's really not that normal. He said she was gifted, most likely, and it turned out he was right. She was. When she was in first grade, she was reading at like 6th grade level in first grade. Then he turned to Sarah, and when they're that young, they're measuring their skull and to make sure it's growing correctly and everything. And he told me it wasn't, and didn't know why. Didn't have any answers. Just it wasn't. At that time, I'm trying to think exactly the order that it worked out. We were going to this little church near us, and a man there owned a machine shop, and Jean's a machinist, and he asked if Jean wanted to come work for him. And Jean had a pretty good job, and he had insurance. But back then, and I still think it is this way today, a lot of companies, you have to wait 12 weeks or so of working there before you get benefits. So it was going to be sort of risky, but we weren't worried about it because we hadn't had any issues. And sure enough, we did. That's when we found out about Sarah. So we were going to have to go to the charity hospital. That's what they were called back then. We were going to go do that. And that was months away before we could do that. And I can remember in those months, I knew there were two possibilities. One was that her head was going to just be small and continue to grow and develop normally. The other option was, well, there were actually maybe two sort of similar options. One was that her fontanelle was fused, and I think they could do surgery for that. But then there was another that could be fatal. So I just sat there for months. They didn't know what was going on, and we didn't do anything. It was a really, really dark time. I can remember I was just like in a fog. And I there are things like snapshots or videos that just stick in your head. And sorry, I was hearing a noise and making sure my Agatha wasn't going to bark. I remember certain days just vividly, like I have a picture. I don't have a picture, but it was like I did. And I can remember sitting in a chair in the living room, and just saying, God, is this all my fault? Because in my estimation, and in God's, I was a terrible sinner before I was saved. And I felt like, and a part of me felt like God was punishing me for that. This was because of that. I inflicted this on my child. And it took a while, a few weeks, I think, to work through that and figure out that, no, that's not God. He doesn't punish us in that way for our sin, because he forgave that sin and he washed it away. So he doesn't come back later and say, oh, you were a bad sinner, so I'm zapping your kid. He doesn't do that. Now, there are consequences to your actions, and even if you become saved, those consequences can be very real. I realized that God was in control of this, and I just had to rest in that. Well, finally, when this appointment came around, it was one of the most horrible, I'm serious, doctor's appointments I've ever been on. First, you were in this huge waiting room, and that waiting room was probably 40 feet long and about 30 feet wide and packed with people, and all these different doctors' offices fed into that. So they were all seeing different doctors, and we were going to be seeing it was University Hospital, so we were going to go be seeing the head of neurology at LSU. It was LSU med school. We were going to see her, and we had to wait 5 hours to see her. And when we got back there, it was so dehumanizing and so just, I don't have the words still, 37 years later. It was just, no, it's more than that, but anyway, all these years later. And I don't have the answer for how I felt. I don't have words to describe it, but they took Sarah. Now, she had been there for 5 hours. She was a baby. She was like 9 months old, 7 months old, somewhere in there. And she couldn't bear weight on her legs. She could not, if she didn't sit up like I'm sitting now, didn't have the strength to hold her body up. If you sat her and held her like in your lap, she would just fall over. She was like a rag doll. She couldn't bear any weight on her legs. And so they were just like picking her up, like bouncing her, on the table, trying to get her to bear weight. And she was exhausted. She was tired, it was not to sit there for 5 hours was not good. So several fellows did that. And then she went to the neurologist, and she did the similar things, and they all discussed their assessment. They made their assessment. And the doctor looked at me, and you have to realize things were very different in 1987 than they are now. I don't think a doctor would tell you this day, but I could be wrong, because we've had some real fun experiences, so I don't know. But the doctor looked at me and said, she's never going to be anything. You just need to stick her in an institution and walk away and go live your life. Can't tell you. Really can't how hard that day was. And it was so hard in so many ways. But I'm stubborn. I am a very stubborn person. And I didn't listen. And while Sarah is not normal, as some people would put it, she has been such a happy girl. You know, she didn't walk till she was 4, and she wasn't potty trained till then. But, you know, today, at 37, nobody's asking that question. Nobody's saying, well, how old were you when you were potty trained? And how old, you know, those things don't matter. She brought and brings so much joy to our family and to other people. She's just can be such a light. The last few years have been really rough, and I'll talk about that more in another video at some other time. But one of the verses, there were several, but one of the verses that really, really spoke to me was Philippians 1:6. I'm going to look over here at my computer where it's at. For I'm sure of this very thing, the one who began a good work in you will perfect it until the day of Christ Jesus. I knew Sarah was God's workmanship. He did this. He allowed it. And not in a capricious or mean way. God had a purpose in it. And I can't tell you how many people's lives have been changed for Sarah, because of Sarah. I know people who've become interpreters and teachers of the deaf because of Sarah. They never would have gone on that path without that. There are so many times I just thank God, because I knew that he was doing this. He had a good work. He began this work. He has taught me so much. I can't even imagine. I never would have learned had I not gone through it. He taught my daughters so much compassion and understanding and love for others who are different through Sarah. And he taught other people, adults, the same thing, and friends, her friends that she grew up with at church. God has a purpose in these very, very difficult times. And we can't see them sometimes. It's like we're walking around in a fog, and I couldn't think, I couldn't see, in a way I couldn't feel for a while. But God showed me the way through that. And he uses that time in my life for his glory. And I am so thankful for it. Now, I'm going to wrap this up. And I want to share a song with you. I can't talk about it right now. I can't say the lyrics. I can't really get into that, because it's one of those songs that, see, I'm choking up. It's one of those songs that really get to me, because it has so much meaning, and it is so accurate in God's love for us and my love for him. So I'm gonna calm down. It's called Though You Slay Me by Shane and Shane, and I'll link it in the description box so that you can go and hear it and really think about the words, because he allows us to go through such trials because he loves us, because he's trying to sanctify us and make us more like Christ. And I can't imagine, as hard as things have been sometimes, the way I say it to my friends is, I can't imagine what a puny Christian I would be. Because if I didn't have to depend on him, if I could do things in my own strength, and I know that's such a common thing, now you hear it so often. It's, be a boss babe, you can do it. It's all about what I can do and what I can overcome. And honestly, I can't overcome anything. That's the truth. Apart from Christ, I cannot overcome anything. It just won't happen. I would want my selfish needs or my selfish wants, not needs, I would want what I think is best, and it probably wouldn't be. So just trust in the Lord in all your difficulties. It's hard. I'm not going to say it's easy. Being a Christian just isn't easy. I was reading about Paul and it's in Acts 16. It's Paul and Silas, I believe it is. And it was talking about how they got beaten because they were sharing the gospel. And I read some more history on that. And it's like literally people were carrying bundles of sticks. Like, I don't remember, if you may not know about this because you may be too young, but years and years ago, and I don't remember how long ago, there was an American boy who was in like Thailand or over in the east, in Asia somewhere, and he was doing stuff, I think maybe scratching cars or painting cars or something, and they caned him, and it was international news, and they just used one. And in my mind, when I thought about Paul and them, they literally stripped their clothes off right there in the street and beat them with bundled up, tied up tight bundles of sticks for sharing the name of Jesus. You know, don't really know what suffering is, do I? Because I don't know what suffering is because I've never been through something like that. And it's not a competition on whose suffering is greater or less, or because God has us each right where He wants us. He has us going through what He wants us to. And that sounds callous, and some people say that's not a loving God. It is a loving God. He, just like you will let your kid, when they're riding a bike, they're going to fall down and scrape their knees when they're first learning. And that's okay, because them getting that scraped knee is going to help them get back on that bike and try again until they get it right. And our sufferings are like those scraped knees. God uses them to perfect us. Not that we'll ever be perfect here, but when we are glorified with Him, we will be. And all this is a sanctification process, a process of making us more like Christ. So, I'm going to go before I just really start going nuts here and start really crying, because you don't want to see that. That's ugly. But I just thank you so much for coming today, and I pray that you'll leave a comment down below. I would really like to know who you are, where you're from. Has God ever done something like this in your life? Has He brought you through a terrible time? A time you thought you wouldn't get through? If so, I would love for you to, if you're willing, if it's not too personal, to share it, because what you share may help somebody else. Thanks so much for watching, y'all. God bless you. Have a good day.